I'm sure you've heard the idiomatic expression, fitting a square peg into a round hole, but did you realize that when it comes to the web, you're often trying to do the same thing? If you bear with me for a second, I've actually got a square peg and a round hole right here on my computer. Now, if I was to try and grab this square peg and put it into this round hole, you can see here that it doesn't fit, quite obviously. But what if we were able to chop off these little parts here to turn it into a circle? Just like this. If we were able to chop off these parts, then we could fit the originally square peg into the round hole, because now we have a round peg that perfectly matches the round hole. Conversely, if we try to take a round peg and put it into a square hole, we get the opposite. We can comfortably fit it into the square peg, but we're going to have some space of the square hole coming through on 4 different sides. Now, of course, the web does not have square pegs and round holes, so let's change this into a more realistic example. Let's say, for instance, we have a rectangle and a square. If I try to fit the rectangle into this square, well, it doesn't work, right? Whether I put it on this side or I put it on that side, basically the rectangle is wider than the square. So what is my only option? I would have to cut off the sides of my rectangle, either like this, or if my rectangle was positioned like such, cut off the right side, or if the rectangle was coming from the left side, I'd have to cut off the left side. And then to do the converse example, if I was to fit a square into a rectangle like such, I can comfortably do that. I can put it to the left, I can put it to the right, I can put it in the center, but no matter what I do, it's not going to cover the full width of the rectangle. And therefore, there's always going to be a part of the rectangle that's coming through behind the square. To add even more complexity to this, imagine that the shape that we're trying to fit this square into, this rectangle here, has a flexible width. We don't know whether the width of the rectangle is going to be this, or this, in which case it makes it even harder to figure out what we're going to do with this square. We don't know. Now I want you to imagine, instead of 2 shapes, we have an image and we have a computer screen. If I was to try and fit this image into this computer screen, I can try and scale it down, place it here in the corner, drag it out. But you see the dimensions of the image don't really fit the space here. So I'm going to place it like there. And unfortunately, unless I cut off some of the image, it's going to have some of the background coming through on left and right. Even if I could get it to perfectly fit on this browser, if I go to a different computer right here, paste this in, you'll see that those same image dimensions don't match this new browser, and the aspect ratio is not the same. So even if I scale this up, as you can see here, there's still more space coming through on the left and right than our previous example. And then let's just say, for instance, the user opens 2 browsers on the one computer. Now what do we do? Okay, we're having to scale this down even more. And what that means, instead of space on the left and right, we're getting a lot of space on the top and bottom. And then to take this example even further, what if it's on a phone? Then we're having to make the image even smaller. A tablet, a little bit bigger, but same principle applies. And you can start to see here that we have an image of a certain aspect ratio, but we have devices of different widths. And even on desktop, that width could be a multitude of different widths. But lucky for us, there are rules that we can set up in CSS that account for this. If we want our image to fit perfectly within the browser with no white space, we tell the width of the image to match the width of the browser and the height of the image to match the height of the browser. The image is now going to respond to any window width, but we've now created a new problem for ourselves. We've now warped the original product image's aspect ratio to match that of the browser's window. And that's why we're getting this stretch and shrinking effect. It should be pretty obvious we don't really want to do this. So typically we wouldn't fix the height of the image to match that of the browser because web pages are much longer than the browser height usually, and users are quite used to scrolling vertically to reach that space. The dimension we're typically more concerned with is the browser width. So with that height setting turned off, you can see now that as my window width decreases, the aspect ratio of the image is maintained, and therefore the height decreases at the same rate. This is basically solution 1, and it works because number 1, it maintains the aspect ratio, no stretching or cropping, at least on the horizontal axis, and number 2, it covers the full width of the browser, meaning that nothing from behind the image makes it through on either side. Super simple, except for one problem. The height decrease, especially on smaller screen sizes, can become a little bit too pronounced. To get around this, we might swap to a different image with a different aspect ratio at a certain breakpoint. Like I said, this approach works great if you want to 1. Ensure 0 image crop, and 2. 0 empty space on either side of the image. But if this changing height doesn't work for you, now we're faced with a compromise. Unless you absolutely have to stretch your image like we saw before, which is typically never the solution, you have 2 options, which are to either allow for space either side of the image or allow for automatic cropping on either side that ensures a fixed height with no white space. These 2 strategies are called cover and contain, and they extend to more than just full width banner images. Let's take a look at this featured collection example. A common section on an e-commerce website, a section like this we often use to list and feature certain products. This over here is the original image, and you can see in the product card, the image is included at a slightly lesser height. Okay, so we're gonna get some crop on the bottom here. You can't see her thumb, for instance, and on the top here. And as I mentioned previously, containers can often expand and contract in websites. So as we extend our featured collection section out like this, you can see that the cropping becomes more pronounced as we maintain the aspect ratio of the image container and we use the cover strategy. So as I have written here, this is called cover. I've added in a gray line here so you can see where the edges of the product card are. This is cover. This is probably most common. But if the whole of the image absolutely needs to come through, we can do something called contain. So as you can see here, in order to allow for all of the image to be within the container, there is going to have to be some white space or whatever color or content is behind that image appearing on the left and right. In this case, it's the left and right because the image is taller than the container. But if we look at some other examples with the images that we've seen so far, that's the example we just saw. But there's also the example of contain with a wide image on a narrow width. You're going to get some space on top and bottom. But with cover, you can cover up all the space of the container, so there's nothing coming through from the background, but you're inevitably going to get some crop. So to get back to the topic title of this video, why is my image cropping? It's likely because the image has been set to cover. And then you might ask, well, why is my image set to cover? Because without some crop, we either need to reduce the height as we run out of width, like such, or allow for space to the sides of the image as the width increases. Bringing it back to our square peg in a round hole example, if we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, the only way is to chop off this part of the square peg in order to make it round like this so it fits in the hole, and that's essentially cover. We need to cut out part of the image to cover the entire space. You see, to fit a square peg in a round hole, you'll need to trim some edges. Likewise, when an image is forced to fit within a container of a different aspect ratio, some of the image will need to be cut out. Otherwise, if we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, it's the web, so we can resize this square now, and we can put it inside the round hole, but you can see here that the dimensions of our shapes don't match, and therefore what we're going to get is part of that round hole coming through on 4 different sides. And this you can think of exactly like contain. All right, so I hope this little analogy here helps to demystify this issue that I've seen come up quite a few times for my clients. We just need to remember that images have fixed aspect ratios, but a web page or any container within the web page that we try and fit our image into is likely to shrink and expand based on the browser width of the user. If you have any follow-up questions you'd like to ask, feel free to drop them below. Or if you need expert help with Shopify, the link to get in touch is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.